how narrative therapy can basically help you fire your internal dictator and storyboard a brand new life. If you've ever felt completely trapped by your own thoughts, well, you're definitely going to want to pay close attention to this framework.
Listen to this quote right here. That voice in your head telling you you're a failure, it isn't you. It's an internal dictator that has hijacked your identity. We are starting right here because that negative voice, it absolutely feeds on fusing your very real struggles with your actual identity. And that just leaves you feeling like a totally passive victim of your own pain. So today, we're confronting that dictator. We're going to learn how to stop seeing ourselves as passive victims and instead become the active authors of our own existence.
Okay, Section 1. Meet the internal dictator and the problem of identity. So the absolutely crucial point we need to grasp first is how we unconsciously merge our pain with who we actually are. It happens to almost everyone, and honestly, it's the root of why that negative voice gets so incredibly loud. Think about it. There is a massive difference between saying, I am anxious, and saying, anxiety is influencing me right now. When a struggle or a trauma becomes totally fused with your identity, when I failed turns into I am a failure, or trauma becomes this is all I'll ever be, we lose our power. Over time, that internal monologue just turns into a psychological tyrant, enforcing shame and hopelessness. But narrative therapy asks a really powerful question to break this cycle. It asks, what if the problem is not you, but something acting upon you?
Which brings us to Section 2, Externalizing the Problem, a tool for liberation.
Let's move to Act 2 of our storyboard and see exactly how narrative therapy breaks this toxic fusion apart. It uses a process called externalization. This is a core narrative therapy technique that creates psychological distance by separating the problem from your actual identity. So instead of saying, I'm worthless, you start asking, wait, when did this inner critic begin controlling my story? It's a pretty small linguistic shift, but wow, it creates a massive amount of psychological distance. The trauma is no longer who you are. It becomes an external force, something you can actually observe, question, challenge, and ultimately resist.
And this externalization process can actually get quite literal. In narrative therapy, people often give the problem an actual name. You might call it the critic, the dictator, the fear, or maybe the shame voice. By actually naming the problem, you strip it of its mystery. You really weaken its emotional grip. You transform from someone being entirely consumed by the problem into an observer of it. And as we know, observers can strategize, observers can mount a resistance. If the problem gained power, well, it can definitely lose power too.
Moving right along to Section 3, Auditing your invisible scripts and deconstructing the story.
Okay, so we know how to externalize the problem now. But you might be wondering, where do these toxic scripts even come from in the first place? Well, they come from family, culture, school, religion, relationships, and society at large. Every single one of us inherits these invisible scripts. In narrative therapy, they call these dominant narratives. They operate completely in the background, silently, but constantly shaping your identity and how you perceive your place in the world. Often, these narratives are culturally imposed, not individually generated, which is exactly why they can feel so incredibly heavy.
You might have internalized lines like, I must always please others, or showing emotion is weakness, or perhaps success determines worth, and I'll never be enough. But here is the secret. Dominant stories are not always true, which means it's high time we start auditing them, almost like you'd audit a really bad movie script. We need to go through these inherited narratives and brutally question their validity in our actual lives.
Here is Section 4, Finding Your Unique Outcomes by Mining Exceptions.
To edit this script, we literally need to search for plot holes in the dictator's story. We need to find the moments of contradiction. So ask yourself right now, when did the story fail to define you? You want to expose that stark difference between the dominant story you inherited and the truth you actually lived. We are looking for those specific moments where you resisted the fear or maybe showed some unexpected strength. Identifying these unique outcomes is literally one of the most powerful techniques in narrative therapy. A unique outcome is simply a small moment in your life where the problem did not fully control you. Basically, these are the exceptions to the rule that your internal dictator constantly tries to enforce.
And this evidence of resilience, it takes so many different forms. Maybe you spoke up once despite feeling intense anxiety. Maybe you survived something incredibly painful. Perhaps you protected someone, kept going when you desperately wanted to quit, or even just showed courage for a few fleeting seconds. These tiny acts of resistance matter deeply because they prove something absolutely critical. The problem has never had complete control over your life.
What narrative therapy does is take these almost invisible moments of resistance and thickens the narrative.
It magnifies them until they form the solid foundation of a brand new identity. You are no longer holding on to the identity of a victim. Instead, you transition into a survivor, a creator, and ultimately an author. Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, Rewriting Your Next Chapter and Reclaiming Authorship. So now we reach the real climax of our explainer. This is where we shift from just understanding the past to actively reauthoring the future. You choose your values, you choose your direction, you choose your relationships. You actually get to assign new meaning to your experiences. Eventually, the goal isn't just to look backward, right? It's to reclaim authorship moving forward. Instead of reacting automatically to those old wounds or societal expectations, you take these exact steps to consciously write the next chapter yourself. You get to decide what things mean now. This is the final, profound shift. You are moving from being a completely passive character to becoming an active architect. It's the transition from merely surviving the story that was handed to you to actively rewriting the whole shebang with real purpose and intention. You are not your trauma. You are not your anxiety. You are not the worst thing that ever happened to you. Narrative therapy teaches us this truly radical truth. The problem is just something influencing your life right now. It is absolutely not the definition of who you are.
We're going to end on this thought. You are the narrator, and the narrator still holds the pen. So take this framework, externalize that dictator, and ask yourself, what does your next chapter say?